Good morning, good people, and welcome to another episode of the Black Pill Radio Show. I'm your host, Mr. Tyler, and as always, we have a wonderful panel of guests. Today, we're going to be talking about fathers' rights. What does fathers' rights mean? Who does it mainly hurt? Hopefully, the children. We have some expert panelists who are going to give you some information. We're also going to talk about some support groups that can help some of the fathers and the moms out there and parents in general. And then we're going to talk about how it affects children in the educational system. So I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves before we go into the first question. And I'm going to start with Mr. Dominic.
Good morning, Tyler, and thank you for having me this morning. My name is Dominic Sarna. I'm an attorney at the firm of Wingate, Carney & Cullen. I've been practicing since about 1990. Our firm does a lot of family court work. We do a lot of custody, a lot of visitation, a lot of child support. We've been doing it for at least I've been doing it for at least 20-something years. We practice in all boroughs, all courts in the city and the state of New York.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Alicia Kinchlow. I'm an attorney as well. I practice family law out of Philadelphia primarily. I do a lot of work with fathers. That's where the majority of my practice is geared to in terms of divorce, custody, support, again, out of Philadelphia.
Good morning. My name is Coach Stephen Lynn. I have the wonderful opportunity of being the host and producer of the television show Dare to Dream, A Father's Guide to Success, the nation's only television show for and about fathers, as well as the founder of D's Driven Dad, one of the leading promoters of responsible fatherhood throughout the nation, particularly here in the city, involving all 5 boroughs, developing programs, supportive services, and training the fathers with our motto being fatherhood is deeds, not words.
Good morning, my name is Jamel Burgess. I'm a youth organizer and community activist in Cypress Hills, East New York. I primarily work with young people around school reform and education policy, helping young people identify issues on their local high school campus and in their community, and identifying strong strategies to solve those issues.
Excellent. So we're going to throw the first question to Dominic. What does it mean when people say fathers' rights?
Well, it's an interesting question. It's a very broad question. I guess the way I would answer it is fathers in New York, and I certainly don't want to speak for Philadelphia. I know we have a very competent attorney here, but I know in New York, fathers tend to oftentimes get a very short shrift. They tend to get marginalized in the legal system. They tend to get put aside, sometimes because of their non-action or non-participation, but a lot of times I think it's because of still a form of prejudice. For instance, if you have a divorce case, many times, fathers, it's just assumed that the father is not going to fight for custody and is just going to capitulate and say, well, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll give in. Also, what people have to understand in New York, and I think a lot of times they don't, when a child is born out of wedlock in New York, there is no presumption of legitimacy for the father, as unlike with the mother. So in other words, if the father does not take a proactive role legally, doesn't file what we would call a paternity petition seeking an order of affiliation, that father is basically shut out of visitation, shut out of custody. So when I look at fathers' rights, I look at it from two sides. The right to participate, but then the responsibility to come forward and say, I want to participate.
For me, fathers' rights, I know you didn't want to speak for me, but it was almost as if you were, because I would agree with a lot of what you were saying. For me, it's about leveling the playing field primarily. I feel that even though in Pennsylvania, neither one of the parents has a presumption of custody or anything like that with regard to the children, I still feel that there is a presumption of custody that goes towards the mother. And so for me, it's about helping fathers level the playing field. It's about providing information. Just yesterday, I did my bi-monthly free workshop for men, where I have a workshop. I have them come into my office, excuse me, and we have lunch. And I talk to them about custody and support. And we talk about what the process is like, what the rules are, and what they need to do. And it's just about leveling that playing field and giving information. So father's rights to me means the rights that you already have, but just letting you know what they are.
Okay. Coach Lynn, can you weigh in on that? Because I know you've had an experience.
From a father's point of view,
Right,
huh?
right.
Everything they said was true. What we've been doing for many years is eradicating that idea that we have separate rights. It's parents' rights. You are a parent equally to the mother. The question is, as the attorney had mentioned, when do you step up to the plate? When do you recognize and let the world know this is my child and I am now responsible thereof for their life? And that starts with the paternity form. When we're encouraging the fathers, particularly with a lot of the rights, or seemingly like you're getting a bad shake in the court system. So we're weighing heavy on preparation, if you will. When you're going into the courts, you got to come in there right. You got to come in there looking right, talking right, having all your documents right, and playing the game, if you will. If you do not, because the ball has been fumbled so many times by fathers, not really wanting the responsibility, courts oftentimes are looking at us like you want to lose anyway. You're not really about this. You don't really want your kids. So that's why we're pushing them to go the extra mile, if you will. But rights are rights, But once again, there's a saying in the precincts, if you will, mama's baby, daddy's maybe. And I was told that personally, and I have my daughter. So that's kind of the thought, we know where it came from for her, but how do we know you? So once again, it goes back to, let's start from the beginning.
Do you recommend that the fathers go into the courtroom with an attorney?
Not necessarily, because if you do it the right way, and that's where a lot of the education comes in, you have your paperwork right. I sign the papers. This is my daughter. This is my child. I am the legal father. Therefore, you go in with some standing. Now, if you're wanting to do the right thing, some advice can't hurt you. However, in that process, particularly in the beginning, attorney is not necessary, particularly if you're doing the right thing. The courts will recognize that.
So, Dominic, when the parents go into the court, it's really about the child. It has nothing to do with the parent, right?
Well, legally speaking, you're correct, but you have to understand, you're looking at two different aspects. First, marriage and non-marriage. And what a lot of people have to really understand is if a child is born out of wedlock, that father is not presumed to be the father of that child, as opposed to a child that is born within wedlock. That father is presumed to be the father of the child. And it makes a big difference. And I'll tell you why. Because when you go into a court, if two people are married, and for whatever reason the marriage doesn't work out, it's automatically presumed that that father is going to have the ability and or the right to file for custody or fight for custody and get visitation. When a child is born out of wedlock, there is no presumption of legitimacy. So the father first has to come forward, file his paternity, be judicially declared to be the father. Now that may seem like a small step or a tiny, it cannot be. I mean, many, many times I've had clients come in, they've had to go through DNA tests, they've had to go through multiple DNA tests, they've had the mother still claiming he's not the father, he's not this, he's that, he's that. So there is a big, big difference. So you have to, I think anyway, my opinion, you have to separate between married, child born within wedlock and without of wedlock. Now the question was whether or not it is just about the best interest of the child. It is. That's technically the legal standpoint. What's in the best interest of the child? But there is still, and maybe someone will disagree with me, I don't know, there are attorneys that do. I personally have always felt that there is still a bias or a prejudice against fathers. There is still a legitimacy that child is going to go with the mother. And when the father says, no, I want the child to live with me because I think I can do a better job, it's a very difficult uphill fight. It really is, unless the mother is just, has a an alcohol problem or a drug problem or something really legitimately wrong. It is an uphill fight. But legally speaking, it should not be. Legally speaking, a mother and a father have the same rights, the same responsibilities towards a child. Technically, legally, they should be on the same playing field, but it's really not. And I see it. I see it all the time. I see it every day.
So, Attorney Alicia, do you think there's a bias against fathers in the court system?
I don't want to speak for all court systems, but I do feel like men have a tougher road than women do. I think that when it comes to, it's just like what Dominic was saying, that when it comes to deciding between the different types of custody that a parent could get, there is, I think, almost a presumption that the mother can get primary physical custody if she wants it. And that if the father wants primary physical custody, it is basically proving why the mother should not have it versus starting off on equal footing. So I think that there is a little bit of a bias. I work not just in Philadelphia County, but the surrounding suburban counties of Philadelphia, which are mostly white. And I feel that there's even a difference there too when black fathers come into those counties asking for primary physical custody or even shared, which in Pennsylvania is 50-50 custody. There is, almost this kind of a throwing a bone to the father saying you're just going to get every other weekend. And then there's a lot of mothers who assume that once they break up with the father, that that's all the father is entitled to. Because we've heard that for so long. You get your kids every other weekend if we're not together. And that's kind of where the mother starts with primary, the father starts with every other weekend. And that's not the way that it's supposed to be.
I couldn't agree more. I think that was very well said. You also have to understand there is an economic point to this. And again, I don't know what the law is in Pennsylvania, but I know in New York, whoever has primary physical custody of that child, that is the one that has the ability to file for child support. Whoever doesn't have the primary physical custody has to pay the child support. So very, very often, you're going to think it's crazy, but there is a big economic point to it. You have no idea how many times I have fathers come to me and say, she's a good mother, she's this, she's that, but the second I give up custody, she's going to hit me with my child support, and she's going to make me pay and pay and pay and pay and pay. And every year she's going to come back and want more and more money. Why don't I just fight for custody? And it really is there is a big economic point to it. And I don't think people really, they don't look at it that way. You shouldn't, but it's looked at like that every day.
Well, a lot of it's historical. Let's be clear on that. For centuries now, the mother has always been looked at as the custodial caregiver for the kids, period. The father was the provider. We're still trying to get out of that era. Therefore, the courts are still stuck in that in a way. When fathers come and they want to, if it's joint custody, or I'm looking for full custody, there's no question we have to jump higher over the bar for many reasons. One, because if we're not coming, who's going to babysit the kids? Who's your after-school provider? Who's got the doctor's notes? What have you done so far? And that's what we've seen for a lot of the fathers we're working with. It's not so that you can get over that bias. It's great for you to start now raising your kids, even under those circumstances, because then you're going to the courts telling them, I'm already doing this, not I will do this when I get my kids. Because for those of us who are doing it, that's unrealistic. You have no idea what it's like to get a babysitter. You've never done their laundry. You've never been to their school. So these are the things we're telling the fathers, get yourself ready for it, because there's no question. That's all across the country we've seen. Courts are mostly the same on that.
But why do we have to establish that? Like, if you want to be there from day one and the kid is born day one,
yes,
you sign a birth certificate, you should automatically be guaranteed a 50-50 split.
Well, remember, there's two, as the attorneys were saying, if you're married, that's a whole different ball game. But if you're not married, which we're seeing the trend over the last few years, of course, there's just not a lot of families getting married, but they're having lots of kids. That puts you in a different category. You have to do some other things, because the court does not presume that you are the father just because you come in there and say you are the father. Where's the paternity test?
So when we watch these paternity court shows, they say the minute you sign a birth certificate, you are acknowledging that you are the father. Does that matter in the court?
It does.
Okay, Alicia, yeah.
For me, in Pennsylvania, it does. Once you've acknowledged paternity in some way, it does. And whether that's signing the birth certificate or signing a petition of acknowledging paternity,
Right.
usually once there's child support filed. It's funny that in Pennsylvania, when you file for custody, or when the mother files for custody, they're saying who the father is. And if you acknowledge that, or you respond to that, then you're basically accepting that and saying that you are the child's father. So I think that is part of it. It is. That's what
Absolutely.
you're signing.
In New York, it's actually different. It doesn't matter all that much about the birth certificate. You could put Richard Nixon down as the father of the child. What matters is whether or not you are judicially declared to be the father. In order to do that, you have to come forward, file a petition, and get an order from a court saying that you are judicially declared to be the father. My firm does.
Is that even when they sign the birth certificate?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because what happens is when you sign, just signing the birth certificate doesn't mean all that much. My firm represents a foster care agency, and we bring a lot of termination of parental rights proceedings for children to be adopted. I've been on both sides, and you have no idea how many times an action will be brought. And all the agency will have to do, there's a notice and a consent father. If you just sign that birth certificate or sign that without getting a court order, you are what we call a notice, not a consent father. What does that mean? That means that the agency would only need to show that they've given you notice of the proceeding, not that they need your consent to have that child adopted. So it is different. New York, under the domestic relations law, is a very, backward kind of state when it comes to that. There are very stringent rules and hurdles that you have to jump through to be declared to be the father. So it is very different, and I think a lot of fathers just don't understand. They're like, Mr. Sarna, I don't understand. I did this,
Absolutely.
I did that. And I said, well, but did you ever come forward and file? No, I didn't know. I had to file a petition. So there needs to be like real education on that, because many, many fathers have walked into a courtroom and said, I didn't even know my kid was in foster care. Or I didn't know the mother took my child. I don't know where she went. And then, a year later, I find out my child's in foster care. My child's here. My child's there. And they had no idea.
That's right.
So let me turn the conversation to education and bring Jamel into this one. These kids going through all these issues with the parents getting divorced, father custody battles, that kind of thing, parents not being involved. How does that affect the child in the classroom?
Yeah, I think definitely in the classroom, young people, when they're coming from backgrounds that they are constantly dealing with challenges in the household, dealing with parents, it shows up in the classroom in students' behavior. Students may act out or feel disconnected from the work because of things that they're carrying outside of this into the school and into the classroom. And thinking of some teachers and educators not being equipped to handle those situations make it that much challenging for that young person. Or if it's a young person first time experience this type of conflict in the household and not knowing how do they communicate that to their educators, to a guidance counselor, to someone in the school to get the support that they need, or even knowing that they need that support, it can really be challenging and affect students' grades, affect their academics, and so much more. So thinking about how do schools and educators set up these spaces for young people where they feel safe enough to provide that information, that they feel supported, that they have trust, and they have these safe spaces in their schools where they can open up and feel supported. And also having parents help young people with that transition, right? I think that it's a lot of weight on parents going through separations or fight custody battles and not knowing what support is needed for their kids when they're going into school, and how does that work? How does that trauma show up in the classroom?
I have a friend who he has like partial custody of his child, split custody with the parent, and she wants to send the kid to child's private school. So he says he has to now pay that money because that's what she wants to do. So when it comes to sending your kids to a private school or a public school, who decides that? And if the child ends up going to a private school or a school that costs money, and the father doesn't want that, like public school's free, does the father still have to contribute?
In Pennsylvania, if the decision is made unilaterally by one parent, the other parent may not be required to pay.
Right.
But it would be proving that you disagreed and that there was some other alternative that made sense for the child. We have a reputation of our public schools being very poor, and then we have a charter school system, and then we have a lot of private schools. But I've had situations where the father has not been made to pay for the private schools because the decision was made without his consent.
New York is basically the same as Alicia was saying. If you can show that it was unilaterally made by one parent over the objection of the other, or that one parent just did it without notifying the other parent and then said, hey, here's a bill for $5,000, chances are you're not going to be responsible for paying. The father would not be responsible for paying for that private school education.
You know, Tyler, that brings up one of the things that we're encouraging the fathers is to do, and it's a sour pill to swallow, but to involve the court systems in some scenarios. That's one of them. If you have not already written out in your agreement, a lot has to do with what your child support is it ordered, or did you and her come up with an agreement? But we're telling fathers now, particularly if you two are not married, maybe it's best that you do enter into the court, or you go to family court and say, hey, I'd like to have a mediator, if you will, on all aspects thereof. Because if you do that, then she cannot just come randomly or sporadically come up with all these bills. I want to do this with and a lot has to do with who's the custodial parent. But if it's joint and you have the court in there all the time, from the father's point of view, you don't have those arguments. You don't have that over your back. I won't let you see your kids. You don't care about them. You don't want to put them in the school. All the negatives that could come out of that because you don't have the money. But if you have it through the courts, and we're telling the dads, they can say that. Listen, I'm not gonna pay $10,000. He's not gonna pay $10,000 so that he could go to a Catholic school. He don't have it. And the courts told him that, not you. So
that's a really good point. And so many times, and maybe Alicia's had the same experience. You have fathers saying, "Oh, because I can't pay this, or I don't want to pay that. You're bad. Your father's this. Your father's that. He doesn't care about you."
Right.
It's all nonsense. Not everyone can afford to send their kid to
private school.
to private school. It's a very big expense.
That's so true.
And what happens, and you hate to say it, but a lot of times what happens is, they come back for more money, and a lot of times you don't even know where that money is going.
True.
They say, the kid needs sneakers, or the kid needs this, or your son needs to go to this camp or that. And next thing you know, you realize, well, he's not really going to that camp, or he's not really going to this.
Or it could have been cheaper if you shopped around.
Or it could be cheaper if you shopped around. And it's really, it's a terrible, terrible scenario. It happens more often than you'd really think or care to think.
Yeah, it seems to be the norm.
So what can we do to change laws? Because it seems like there's a lot of bias, unfairness towards fathers, right? But those are laws. Can't we just change them?
Well, I haven't seen, not necessarily, from our point of view, servicing the fathers, it hasn't been necessarily that the laws were wrong. It was just, there was bias in it. The judge had their own personal agendas. The courts, the lawyers, all that, everybody does that, particularly around fatherhood issues. It's very touchy. You really don't know how somebody's thinking about it till you bring up that subject. So what we're saying is the only way, until such time as we do some legislation, and there are some things we're working on now, we have to change our game. If they're playing, you see how they're playing it. So you better come in that court, suit and tie if you got one, shirt and tie, no doubt. You better come in a lot of yes sirs, yes ma'am. Make sure that you have the documents. You know what they're going to ask you for. If you come in there and, I don't have it, you're out. One shot. And that seems to be the only way until such time as we pull our heads together and really be able to draft some laws, if you will.
All right, so I want to ask you guys, we'll go around the table. If we can make some changes, what would those changes be? And we'll start with Dominic.
Well, it's interesting you said changing laws. In order to change laws, you have to change the people who make the laws.
Yeah.
That means voting for different people for your state senate or state assemblyman, voting for different people who are going to be judges. Like, for instance, here in New York, family court judges, which I think a lot of people primarily with these issues deal in family court. Those judges are appointed by the mayor. We don't have a say. You, Tyler, myself, Alicia, I don't know how it works in Pennsylvania, but we don't have a say in who the judges are. But we do have a say in who the mayor is. All right? Now it's interesting, when people run for office or whatever, they're asked all kinds of questions. You know what question then very rarely, if ever asked, what is your opinion on the judiciary? Who would you appoint as a judge? Who would you appoint as family court? Until and unless you begin asking those questions and changing the people who you vote for and are elected, nothing really is going to change. And that's the first thing you need to do. The second thing you need to do before that is fathers, as was said, they have to. I think it was get on the game. That was a good
step the game up. Absolutely.
They do. They have to come in, say, I'm a serious individual. You got to take me seriously. So many times I see they come in and they need to be taken seriously. In order to be taken seriously, shirt, a tie.
Right.
Here I am. I'm ready, willing, and able to step up.
I agree with what Dominic just said. Definitely about playing the game. That's the major thing that I talk to my clients about. You have to come in dressed like you're going to an interview because you basically are being interviewed. So you need to be prepared to play the game that you have to play. The other thing I tell people is about getting educated before you need the education. You need the information first. And there has been, I was there recently in Philadelphia at least, a big change of, I feel like our counseling people are coming out in the community and really kind of getting their voices heard and making the connections. So I would tell people to visit your local congressman or congresswoman and tell them what your issues are. Our bar associations are very active in terms of what bills are passed and what are not passed and giving a say. And I would say speak to those people. Know what's going on in your bar associations. If you have a family law matter, know what's going on with the family law bar because we are very active. Although not a lot of the attorneys are active, the bar itself is active in deciding what they think, what they give their stamp on. And so I make sure that my voice is heard in that, and I make sure that the people who I represent, that their voices are heard as well. But it is about educating yourself, and it is about playing the game, because the rules, some of them are not terrible. They are guidelines, but it is big playing the game.
That's right. Well, we have a couple of pieces of legislation that we've been working on for quite some time. We're happy now we got our foot in the door. One in particular is around child support. Unfortunately, this nation does not have a centralized system where if my children's mother had to move to California with her family, just happened to get on public assistance and gave my name happily, I don't hide. So then all of a sudden there's a child support case opened in California, but I already had one opened in New York because that's where she's from. So now I have two open child support cases, both don't talking to each other. Then she moved to Atlanta and had to get on public assistance there. There's another case. So there is no centralized system. They do not talk to each other. Many of us have been bitten by that on many fronts, all the way to getting arrested, the whole nine. So we're now pushing for, in Washington, D.C., to get a national registry similar to a driver's license, that if you put my name in, then it's going to pop up where my open child support cases are so that we no longer have double dipping. And lastly but not least, we're working heavily now with the Department of Education specifically for that. We knew that, and it's clear that when fathers are involved in the children's educational life and the school system openly accepts them, that child can soar. And I don't care where they are. You could be in the projects. You could be anywhere. But because my father makes sure that I get those A's and B's, that the child has a potential. So now we're looking for the DOE to hopefully this year, particularly out of DC, to adopt the fatherhood program on a national scale so that in all the schools, they at least for a week, we have the date already set, that they're highlighting that fatherhood piece. We're drawing them in, giving them the resources, letting the fathers know you are equal part, if nothing else, in your child's education. Costs you nothing. So that's what we're pushing those two legislatively.
I think the one word that's resonating with me right now is education itself. I think it's highly crucial that fathers are being educated, just not on the system, but also on political education itself. Like, these issues stem much deeper than the courtroom and those conversations with the judges. It's especially for Black and brown folks, people of color. They've been marginalized and they've been have been put to the side. So it takes a lot of political education, being aware of the past, understanding advocacy, the importance of advocating for yourself, advocating to shift laws and policies, and how does that impact you and your family and the cases that you're going through. And going back to education in the schools, really having the Department of Education and all schools setting up safe, open spaces for young people, having more counselors, more therapy, more mental health services in schools, not cops, counselors. We need support services, positive alternative resources for young people when they're facing trauma outside of the school, in the household, that they can feel supported and safe in their schools.
So we are at the halfway point, and I want to switch the conversation a little bit. We know that a woman can get pregnant, and a woman can decide if she wants to have that baby or not. She can have an abortion, or she can bring the baby to term. The man has no say. Now, a woman gets pregnant, the man wants to have a child, and the woman can say, no, I don't, and she can have an abortion, right? So when she brings that child to term, a man has to pay support for that child, even if he didn't want one. And there's a lot of women trapping men, and they know these men don't want babies, but they'll have them anyway. Multiple babies, multiple daddies, just bringing them into the world. And all these men are just got to pay. And we know a lot of them don't even want these babies, right? So I think that's something we need to talk about and something we need to change. But also, if the man wants to have the baby and he's going to step up and take that responsibility, I think a woman should be forced to carry that baby to term if it's his baby that he produced, right? We know a woman can drop a child off at a fire department house or a church, and she don't have to pay no child support. She's not responsible for nothing. She won't even go to jail. She can just give up her rights as a parent, and nothing happens to her. But if a guy says, hey, I don't want a baby, and she has it, and he wants to give up his rights, he can't. He's forced to pay. I don't think that's fair. So I'm going to throw this question to Alicia, because she was smiling on it. And
She couldn't wait, you saw her.
I want you to just
wait.
I want you to just tell me your thoughts and your feelings about what I just said.
So, I've been asked this question before, and I successfully dodged it, but this will be a little harder. I think there's a lot of things that go into that. I mean, the first thing is we talked about acknowledging paternity. That would be the first thing you would even have to do. So now you're talking about whatever risks that may come along with doing a DNA test or paternity test on a woman who's pregnant, and doing it at a time where it's early enough for her to still be able to get a legal abortion or not. So I think that would be even the first step, and kind of getting through the courts quickly enough to even be able to get that done is going to be a hurdle. So I'm just thinking of some of the procedural issues that you might even run into, even getting into that type of discussion. I think it depends on where you stand on this side of abortion. I'm more pro-choice than anything else. I have my own personal beliefs about how I feel about it, but for everyone else, you make your decision. I don't see a world where we're forcing women to do that. I just don't see that can happen. But trust me, I get the idea of women not, having the whole say in it. I have 3 sons. So I think about how a lot of this, I'm married, I have 3 sons, so I think about how a lot of this plays out for them. But I can't see that being a reality, honestly. But I get the double standard.
So are you okay with a woman being able to drop her child off at a church, and she relinquishes all rights, responsibilities, and doesn't have to pay a penny, and she could just do that, but a man can't?
Well, a man actually could do the same thing if he had the child and drop the child off.
Right.
But I think what you're getting at is that if she doesn't want to, I mean, the idea of a woman or someone being able to drop a child off that they're not willing to care for is, we have that for a reason, so that children aren't being hurt or left somewhere and not getting what they need. But so I'm okay with a system that allows a person to be able to give a child to someone who is better able to care for it. I am. But I think that, fathers don't have the same, they just don't. But if a father did have the child and the mother wasn't around and the father couldn't take it, he could do the same thing.
So fathers don't have the same rights, is what you were going to say?
And not when it comes to, they don't. I mean, honestly, we know that that's not the case right now. You don't have the same rights when it comes to the child who's being carried. You just don't at this point.
So Dominic, what do you think about that question?
I think the one statement encapsulates the entire discussion. The rights, they're not there. They're not the same. And that's the purpose of today's discussion. Look, men, you're never going to get to the point where men and women have the quote-unquote direct equal rights, especially in this issue. You're not, because as you said, and I think the saying goes, women have choices, men have responsibilities, I think is the way it goes. And that's really what it is. I mean, how many times, like you said, a woman says, I don't want, it's not the right time. I can't have the child. So she decides that I'm going to have the abortion. And then there have been cases where men have run to court to try and get, for lack of a better term, a stay, preventing her from doing it. Impossible. It will never happen. If not just because of Roe versus Wade, the abortion decision, but I can't possibly, even in the deepest, most conservative states that we have, I can't possibly see a court ever forcing a woman to have a child because the father says, I want the child. And then you know what ends up happening? She has the child, and then she says, well, I changed my mind. I want the child. I mean, it's never going to happen that way. But again, this is what we're here to discuss. This is why it is unequal. This is why men and women do not have the same rights. And I think Alicia, said it perfectly. They don't.
So, Coach Lynn, let's change this conversation a little
Sure.
bit. All right, so we don't have the right as men to tell a woman she has to bear a child. But if she decides she wants to have a child, and we know we don't because it was a side piece situation, we were just hanging out, I'm already married, I just don't want a child, you trapped me, whatever it may be, why can't a man relinquish his rights like a woman could?
Relinquish his rights in what do you mean?
Responsibilities in terms of, like before the child even comes, you should be able to identify who the father is, and he should be able to decide if he wants to be a father or not.
So that's going to come, and that's called the paternity test. Now, when the paternity test comes out, and you got a lot of DNA in that, your child, your blessing, then guess what? You were the one smooching, kissing, hugging, I love you. Now, all of a sudden, you don't want to have anything to do with this baby. That's not how it works. And we don't promote that with our fathers. Actions have consequences. But we have to. We're now working to change that mind frame, because she's going to do what she wants to do. If she wants to have that baby, she's going to have it. Tell you anything. But you got to get your mind straight. You have to start saying, wow, I'm now going to have a child. What do I do? Particularly with somebody that I don't really like her. I don't even know her, which is just an area you gave. What's your name again?
Dominic.
It's not you. I'm sorry, her. Not you. I see you, man. You look good over there. But those types of scenarios, we see them daily. Coach, I'm going to have a child with this girl, man. I don't really like her. I don't even know her. Yeah, but now you got to get ready for it, because the baby will be here. And if you look at it as a blessing instead of a hindrance, don't look at it as, oh, my life is going to change now for the better.
All right, so there's an article out there that's talking about a lot of these mostly white men who are in the Hamptons. They're getting vasectomies, and they're freezing their sperm because there's a lot of women trying to trap them, and there's a lot of crazy stories that go into that. So I know Jamel doesn't have any children, right? So that might be something you might want to think about.
Yeah, we're going to get you some, bro.
I'm taking notes.
But what do you think about the idea of maybe having a vasectomy, freezing your sperm, so you don't get caught up and you don't get trapped? Vasectomies can be reversed in most cases, about 50-50. But you froze your sperm, so when you do find a woman you want to settle down with, be with, marry, you're good. You won't really have to worry about being trapped. What do you think about that?
I'm unsure. I'm past that.
I'm scared, right?
I'm unsure. I don't know. I don't think I would want to take it that far. And I pray that my mother raised me good enough to be mindful of avoiding getting into mistakes in certain situations. But I'm curious to know what other folks think about that.
That's what they have condoms for, right?
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If you could just change your lifestyle a little bit, and
Exactly.
you wouldn't have to do.
Well, if you're broke and you're a bummy dude, it doesn't matter to you. But when you're making millions of dollars, you have financial assets at stake, it does matter. You have to take responsibility for what you own and what a woman might try to get from you. So there's a lot of people.
I'm saying that is true, but again, what type of lifestyle are you leading that you're sleeping with women who you don't trust? And it all comes down to changing. Maybe you need to reevaluate your lifestyle.
I agree.
Hey, they're out there having fun, just like the women, right? So
Actions have consequences.
Exactly.
So you want to play the game? No problem. When you get caught, that's what you get. And if you, with the that just sounds just to the extreme. And right? Come on. However, you do have to be careful, and I see where they're coming from. You got to be whether you're broke or not, and it could happen in a second. Next thing you know, you got a baby coming. So we're telling them, you be careful. I don't care who you are, where you live. Just take it easy.
So let's talk about the type of support services that Coach Lynn's program provides.
Well, as we were mentioning before, to support, particularly in the legal aspect and area and educational, we're getting the dads ready, if you will. That's what we do. All throughout the nation now, we were able to put together coalitions, put together a team where the fathers now can get the supportive services, particularly early on, and the information, so that by the time they come to the attorneys, by the time they go to the court, they would have been skilled. They would have had several practices, particularly in how you deal with the courts, having patience with your anger management, because you're not going to win the game overnight. And don't get frustrated, and definitely don't quit. So this is what we're doing. What we found is, because of our approach, our team aspect, fathers tend to understand that. They tend to galvanize around it, that bond. You don't give up on your team, yourself, not them, as well as they get the strength in that. No, I'm not alone. You're not alone. We're going to go to court with you. We're going to help you out. We're going to help you find the legal advice, or the school, help you walk through with the schools one time. After that, all we say is pass it on. So those are the types of things we're doing.
So is that a free service, or do these people have to pay for it?
No, it's all free for the fathers. We don't charge to be on the team, but we do require, and I don't fold on this, that you prioritize your children above all things. If I see that now you're trying to be slick and you're just trying to get out of something, not really take care of your family, you cannot be part of this team. Because your family is everything. And once the dad understands that, this was a blessing for you. This was a way out for you. Next thing you know, the burdens don't seem so heavy.
So how do they find you?
Of course, online, Deeds Driven Dad. Deeds Driven Dad. And that's our motto. Deeds, not words. Gonna do a lot of dishes, do a lot of laundry. But deedsdrivendad.com, and then they'll be able to see some of the work that we're doing and get in contact with us all across the nation.
And we'll have all that information on the website as well, so you can go to blackpillradio.com. Anything that we list, from Twitter pages to personal websites, Instagram pages, or whatever, all that stuff will be placed on the website, so you don't necessarily have to go find a pen and write things down. We'll definitely have that stuff linked up for you so you guys can receive it. So I want to jump to Dominic. And if somebody comes into your office and they want to hire you, what's the process and how does that work?
Well, first I would have them come in, and before I even discuss hiring and firing, I'd want to know exactly a little bit about who they are, whether they've gone to court before, whether they've hired lawyers before, if so, what court, what judge they've been before. And the other thing is, you have to try to get, why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they coming to you? Are they coming to you because they, like we said, they're trying to get out of something, or are they coming to you because they really want to step up and, if lack of a better term, do the right thing? Depending upon why they're coming to you will depend upon how you, whether you take the case, don't take the case, and if you do take the case, how you approach it. If someone comes to you and says, hey, look, I think this woman is doing a job on me, then we go one way. If they come in and they say, listen, I've been around, we've been together for 2 years, she just kind of left, and now she's hitting me up for support, you go in a different direction. So the first thing I would do is have them, come in and really try to get a feel of who the person is. Because, every case is different. Every person is different. And you have to treat every client, it's not just a cookie cutter mentality. Everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different set of scenarios. And not everyone is the same person. And you have to take each person as they come individually.
And Alicia, how do you handle clients that come into your office?
I agree with Dominic. I'm an advocate. So before I started doing a lot of family law, I did a lot of disability work. And you're really being an advocate for someone. And that's how I look at it as. So I want to make sure that I'm the right fit for you, as well as you're being the right fit for me. We know family law can get crazy. And, it can be very stressful. And I try to choose my clients carefully for that reason. I want people that I'm going to like working for and with. So I do sit them down. I do try to figure out what the reason is for whatever it is they're seeking. People are trying to just get out of child support. People are trying to lie. People are just trying to milk their child's father for whatever they can get. You know, those are the type of people I don't want to work with. So I choose not to. I send them on their way. So for me, it is that sit down, let me tell you how I practice law, let me tell you generally how I am, and let me see what's going on with your situation. I do ask about, you know, which county you're in, if you've been before a judge before, what was, you know, what happened. Yeah, basically that.
And you also run a father support group?
I do. So like I said, I do the workshops. We had one yesterday, so it was our June one. But I have them come in and I literally give them the statutes. Like, this is what they're supposed to do. This is what you should see in every decision. And when I tell you, the men are just like, I saw none of this. We didn't talk for more than 10 minutes. I didn't get a chance to even sit down before the judge. They didn't hear anything I had to say. You know, you wouldn't even believe it if you didn't see it yourself sometimes. That's exactly what happens. But that's what I do. So I have the men come out, and then sometimes women come. Like yesterday, we had a woman who came in place of her son, because often it's the mother who's helping to be the advocate. I don't know if you see this too. Yes. The mother of the child is the father is coming, or the new girlfriend or the new wife is seeing what's going on, and they're the one referring the gentleman to me.
That's, I don't mean to jump, but that's an excellent point. I have no idea how many times, like you said, it's the new girlfriend or the new wife or the mother coming say, hey, you know, my son, I think, is getting taken advantage of, or
Yes.
the new girlfriend. Hey, it happens all the time. It's so many times that you wouldn't even believe. They really do. And because I think a lot of times what happens is men just, I don't know if they get beaten down or they just throw up their hands, they get frustrated and they say, whatever, and they just kind of, and that's, you can't do that. You can't.
Quit.
And then when the girlfriend or the mother comes and says, hey, wait a minute, what is this bill? What are you doing? I don't understand. Why are you doing that? He says, I don't know. Someone told me. He says, no, this isn't right. So there's, no, we got to go to a lawyer. So they no, we got to go. And they're the ones pushing it. It happens, as Alicia said, it happens more times than you would really think.
So Alicia, if people wanted to come to your support group, how would they go about that?
So they should follow our Facebook page, which is the Kentrell Law Facebook page. And I always post whenever I'm doing them, and I usually do it through Eventbrite, so people can the tickets are free, but it's the easy way to track them. And I do them at least every other month. So the next one will be in August.
Okay, so now we want to throw the conversation back to education. And Jamel, what struggles do you find personally when you're working with children who might be in a foster care system or children whose parents are going through a divorce?
One of the main issues that's reoccurring that I find in young people is the lack of conversation or folks that are willing to listen to them. I think young people sometimes find it hard to communicate or articulate issues that they're going through in their household outside of the school. And also on both ends, the school has a lack of resources or people equipped with the skills to engage in those conversations and help those young people feel supported. One thing we're working on with a coalition that I'm with in New York City is pushing the mayor to increase the funding on cultural curriculum that meets young people's needs, and also creating a bigger budget for social workers and counselors in schools. We need positive practices, positive programs for young people that help build community, that strengthen school climate and culture, so young people feel like they have a voice, that they can be listened to. I think a lot of, in certain classrooms and schools, there's this top-down method that the teacher's the one who's talking, and young people feel like they're not being listened to. They may be heard, but they're not being listened to, and it's a big difference. And we're working on getting a higher budget in these positive programs in schools, so that young people can have these resources and have these outlets in their schools to make them feel safe, to build positive school climates and culture.
So what is it like when you deal with the parents?
So me personally, I directly don't work with the parents as much, unless I have like a real tight bond with the young people. But it varies. Sometimes there's parents that are extremely invested in their student, in their child's academics and educational path, and that is extremely helpful for the process. That they can the parents may even sometimes give you the heads up, like, hey, so and so happened last week, So now when I'm in the classroom or I'm in school with a young person, I already have some insight on why he or she may be acting differently or not be communicating. And then sometimes there's some parents that they just are like mentally checked out and not involved at all. That doesn't bother me. I know my role is to be present for that young person, but it is much better when there is either one or both parents invested as well, and there's an open communication between them.
All right, so I know my other three panelists, you guys are all parents, right? So what is it like when you're sending your child to school? What kind of school are you sending your kids to? Is your kid in a school where there's like a high divorce rate, if you can possibly find that out? Is there a lot of foster kids in that school? Is that something that you guys even look into when you're choosing a school for your children?
Well, I'm blessed. My kids are grown. I have grandchildren, so I'm counting my blessings on that one. Thank goodness. However, back in the day, we had to take those things into consideration. The education was the key. The environment around the school, to and from, that was big. Particularly I was a single parent, blessed, so it was just me and my daughter. So I had to watch out for her, even though she wasn't watching out for herself. So that's a big thing, particularly for fathers. What's the route? What's going on after school? Where does she have to go after school? Let me go see it myself. So I was always big on that. Let me pave the way for her, if you will, as well as to your other comment. When fathers are involved in the child's education, and I mean fully involved, he is the bad cop, if you will. He's the no. We found more times than not that the child can excel in school, no matter what, even if they're still dead broke like everybody else. But because their father is so on it, next thing you know, they're valedictorian. Next thing you know, they're going to college. So we know that variable makes a difference. And we've heard it from the teachers, counselors, administrators, all the way up. So we're encouraging the fathers, if you don't do anything else, you make sure that homework is tight.
Have you ever thought about homeschooling your child?
That's funny. Well, I wasn't trying. I had to work 8 jobs, man, just to buy some shoes. But no, I did. My daughter went to Catholic schools all the way through. I was blessed.
Okay.
So I just hustled that one.
And Alicia?
I don't know the exact makeup. Our school district is very diverse. There seems to be a lot of blended families. I know this is like a question I have too, because we help make custody arrangements, trying to give parents almost equal time, even though it's for the best interest of the child. But I always worry about how the exchanges work on the children. And I know in Pennsylvania, there's been this 2-2-3 split going on. So there used to be, if you're shared custody 50-50, it would be 1 week on, 1 week off type of situation. Now it's like a 2-2-3, 2 days and 2 days and 3, and then kind of rotate. And that just seems like a lot for a child. One of my son's friends lives directly across the street from us, and he's not home on any weekends because he's with the other parent. And for him, he's going away, so he can't participate in any of the birthday parties, any of the things that are going on at school. And I know that's affected him because it's made it difficult for him to kind of keep up with the rest of the friends. So I don't know exactly about the makeup of the entire school, but I do know that, they see it and it affects them. And I'm always curious how it works on the other end and how the children are adapting to the exchanges. Because I see, for me at least, when the children get to like 14 or 15, they're like, I'm done with that. I want to be with mom. I want to be with dad. For whatever reason, I just don't want to keep going back and forth as much as that.
I have one daughter. She's in high school. She goes to a Catholic school. She's gone to private schools her whole life. The makeup of my school is, I'm going to be honest, it's not diverse. It's not at all. The makeup of the school is, I would venture to say, probably anywhere from 80 to 85 to 90%, maybe more, married, stable families, so forth and so on. It's just a choice my wife and I made. I went to Catholic school. My wife went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic school actually from grammar school straight through law school. My wife went to Catholic school, except for college. Then she went back to Catholic school. That's where we met at St. John's. But Alicia, I think if I could just pick up, she made, I thought, an excellent point. What I see is a lot of parents, what a child needs most is they need stability. They need to know that this boom, 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 this is how it's going to be. And when they have stability in their lives, you'd be surprised at how much they can excel.
Amen.
And going back and forth and up and down, I've seen it. I mean, I've had parents that's come up and say, we'll do 2 days here, 3 days there, a week there. If this is what they want to do, that's fine. But what you end up seeing a lot of times is exactly what Alicia says. When they get to be 14, 15, 16, like, I don't want to do this anymore because it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. So if someone told you today that you're going to be living in Pennsylvania for 2 weeks and then you're going to be living in New York for 3, then going back, you'd be like, what are you, crazy? I'm not doing that.
Even now, as grown-ups, we don't
We
even
went
want
to
it.
the adults.
And in New York, once a child hits 14, he or she has a tremendous say in what they want to do, who they want to live with, and what they want to do. And look, maybe it works for some. I can't possibly see it work for the vast majority of kids living like that. Children, for whatever, in my opinion, stability, routine. When you have a baby, right? What do? You get into a routine. You feed them at 6. You put them to bed at 7. Whatever it is.
Immediately.
But it's a routine. And the routine is not just so you can keep your sanity and have a little time to yourself. But the routine does is it establishes a security for the child.
Yes.
Because they know. And the other thing that they see is who's in the house.
Yeah.
All right? Who's in the house? Well, mommy and daddy are in the house, right? When they don't see daddy on a consistent basis for whatever reason, you may not believe it, but even in high income families, when they do a divorce, I mean those are bitter divorces.
Absolutely.
They're not just bitter because about the money. They're bitter about, well, dad is away for 3 weeks out of the month because he's traveling or he's doing that. The child doesn't have that same stability because they don't see dad as a dad. They see dad as someone, he comes in, he does a little here, a little there, and then at the end of the day, like, hey, what do I have to listen to him? He's never around. He doesn't, he doesn't come to my ball games. He doesn't help me. He doesn't throw the ball. Whatever it is. So they gravitate towards the mother. It happens. They need to see a routine and stability, and. When you don't have it, it's 3 and 2 and whatever kooky scenario you think you're coming up with, I don't think it helps.
But Tyler, could I real quick?
Sure.
I know we got a little time. Let's talk about what we told for the dads on that scenario. 1, you have to equal the same level of provision. However your mom was raising you, her style, her rules. When the father's oftentimes it falls off when it goes to his house. I can do what I want at my dad's house.
Right.
He doesn't make me do the homework.
He doesn't make me do the homework.
So we're telling the fathers, when you have to get over that, you make sure they don't miss one beat. You just got a different bed to lay in, but everything still applies.
Right.
As well as some fathers, you got to bite that bullet sometimes. Even though I have the summers, but they want to go with their friends to summer camp at their mom's house.
Right.
Bite it. You should have did all their laundry all the time, all year anyway, so you still know them. One weekend won't make them.
Right.
So that's what we're telling the
that's
dads.
An excellent point. How many times do they fight? Well, it's my weekend. It's my weekend. Yeah, but he wants to go see.
Right.
Well, I'm not. And you know what it is? You know what you find out? It's not about the child. They're trying to, for lack of a better term, screw the other parent. Because they're angry, because there's bitterness and anger there. Well, this is my weekend. I'm not giving up my weekend. Blah, blah. You have to think of what's good for your child.
That's right.
And when they get to be 14 or 15, they're going to do what they want to do.
Exactly.
If you didn't build that house early on, particularly those years.
Right.
So we have 1 minute left on the show. And
90 seconds.
And it seems like we're dealing with broken relationships and sexual irresponsibility, right? So being that Jamel is the one who doesn't have any children. I don't know if he's in a relationship, but he doesn't have any children. Not yet. He doesn't have any children. What advice would we give to him so he don't get caught up in this mess?
Reach for your dreams now, son. You take care of yourself. Be careful. Just go for your dreams now. Make sure that you're happy inside. You'll find somebody who's going to join your journey, but you got to be happy inside first.
I absolutely agree with
60
that.
seconds.
You need to know who you are, what you want before you get with somebody else and try to figure it out later. It's a lot harder.
Very quickly, I would agree. And just, you take care of yourself for now. You figure out where you want to go, what you want to be, and who you want to be. And just try to live a good life and lifestyle. And it'll all work out.
That's right.
I'm
It
sorry,
really
Jamal.
will.
I know this is feeling like an intervention, but
Thank you. It's good. Thank you.
We're gonna be watching you.
we just want to make sure you're good. We want to take care of you,
Yes.
make sure nothing crazy is going on. So, guys, thank you for listening to the Black Pill Radio Show. As always, we have live broadcasts every first and third Sunday morning of the month. For the month of June, we're celebrating fathers. We're talking about issues that fathers deal with. For our next broadcast on the 3rd, we will be highlighting fathers who are doing amazing things in their community and with their children.
10 seconds.
And as always, thank you for listening, and you guys be safe. Peace.